So I wanted to outline 10 hypotheses about Nostr. Obviously, I've been spending a lot of time both using Nostr and meeting people and thinking about it and talking about it. And it's a newly emergent ecosystem, so we don't have the right answers. I can't tell you for sure exactly how it's going to evolve. But I think one of the best ways to gain an understanding of what it could be is to try to make claims and test hypotheses and get feedback on that. So I wrote up 10 hypotheses about Nostr, and I wanted to share them here, and I welcome the feedback. If you agree, if you disagree, if you think this is crazy or you think this is right on, I'd love to hear about it. Number one, clients are going to be highly strategic. I don't know if they're going to make money or not, but I think they're going to be important in the same way that web browsers are important. You think about some of the biggest web browsers and how they impact the web. Chrome is obviously the biggest, and Safari is quite large too, big market share. And they all are strategic in that they drive toward Google search. It's a very privileged position to be in. So I think that clients are going to have similarly privileged positions, and they may or may not be able to directly monetize that. But they're going to be strategic assets, and they're going to be helpful in defining how the ecosystem evolves. Remember, an important piece of this is that clients have the ability to make default relay selection, and that may become an important point. Number two, so relays incur real-world costs. They have storage, bandwidth, and compute costs, and they have to recoup that cost. So they, long-term, I believe they'll have to get paid for providing that service. Now, if you're getting paid to provide that service, there's some space to potentially capture some margin as part of that payment. So I think it's like a natural place that relays will end up being a center that monetizes pretty directly, which is why a client could be strategic to a relay. If you have a big client, you get to set a relay as a default. Those relays then help you get more visibility, more nodes getting stored to that relay, more nodes getting pulled from that relay. And if the relay incurs costs and has potential to capture margin, then the client is strategic in that it gets to drive traffic to and from relays. That might be the money center. Number three, large relays will be run by centralized players, but competition will abound. There will be jurisdiction-specific competition and community-specific competition, and small hobbyist relay operation will probably always be a thing, and some people will probably want to run the relays as just for their own self-sovereignty, but that may not be the typical choice. Number four, large relays will have to compete to have the best picture of the network. That means the best understanding of the follower graph, which nodes have been written, publishers, followers, nodes. They have to have better bandwidth, ingress, and egress, better geographic distribution around the world, and better performance. When you have all the nodes and the follower graphs together, number five, search across nodes will become highly centralized and very valuable, a credible contender to Google. Search requires an understanding of global state. If you type a query, the search engine has to understand as much as possible about which nodes are where, which graph connections indicate quality, potentially which kinds of zaps or payments have been made to tip or attach value to communication. And so I think that's going to be a highly centralized search engine. I would hope there could be multiple competitors in search, but I also think there are going to be returns to scale, and there's going to be real costs associated with operating all of that search and infrastructure in the search engine. Which brings us to number six, search quality will primarily come from new signals of trust. Number seven, payments from a trusted public key to a note will both increase the trust of the information in the note, and it will increase the trust signal on the public key of the note's author, especially if we can understand with respect to the topic. One is the public key follower graph and having the best visibility into who's connected to who follows who. If person A makes a lightning payment to a note written by person B, there's a lot of signal about the quality of that, especially if we already know something about person A. So it's not just the fact that a payment was made, but it's like, what kind of trust, reputation, topics do we know about A, and how does a zap or a note tip from A to person B's note indicate something about the quality of that note, quality of that information, and potentially quality about person B's knowledge about that topic. Which brings us to number 8. Payments will be required to flow between a bunch of loosely coupled relationship between users, clients, and relays. We've established that relays have a real cost. Clients get to choose relays or get to suggest relays. Ultimately, users probably will end up paying for some of this. You've got a loose federation of users, clients, and relays, and none of them have each other's bank details, and seems like a great use case for payments, especially an internet native form of payments. And so I think this is going to become the leading use case for Bitcoin Lightning payments in the next decade. Number 9, advertising will not become coupled to consumption on clients. I think there's a common belief or understanding, kind of a skeuomorphic belief, that the way advertising is best implemented as kind of interrupted within a feed of consumption. The reason that we default to think about that is because that's how it's always worked. When the client and the database are coupled, you have to access that client. The client developer earns the right to show you an ad. And I think in this new world, the client developers are going to be in much more aggressive competition with each other. So I think it will be hard if you build a great client and then you insert ads. Probably somebody else will be building a very similar client and doing a version of it with no ads. And because the data that you care about is not controlled by the client with ads will probably lose out to the client that chooses to not run ads. So I think from a client perspective, even though it's the default of how we think about it because of the existing architecture of the internet, it's not a likely future. Client experience is going to get decoupled from ads. Traditional consumption client does not include ads, and ads become a different activity. Which brings me to number 10, which is advertising formats will become more diverse and include more interactive and participatory experiences, which will be more valuable to advertisers and to users who choose to engage with them. And what I mean by that is if you decouple advertising from the clients, you assume that the client ecosystem is going to be competitive, and so no single client is going to be able to run its own ad network effectively. You actually will see advertising become a separate topic. So maybe somebody will run an ad server or like an ad network. Advertisers will come there, and if I want to use a client, maybe a given client doesn't run ads, but maybe charges me, let's say, 10,000 sats a month. And so I can either just pay that 10,000 sats from an existing stash of sats, or I can choose to go visit an ad server, auth with my private key to the ad server so I can verify who I am, which tells you stuff about what I know about, what I care about, who I interact with. And then an advertiser can use that as targeting information to serve me an ad in a very diverse format. They can sort of create totally new formats because they don't need to fit inline in a feed system, in an interrupted feed system. So you could imagine an advertising format that has me watch a movie trailer and then surveys me about what happened in the trailer to ensure that I was engaged, and maybe even offers me a discount for a digital download of the movie. And I think that type of ecosystem, maybe if I consume the ad, I get 100 sats or 1,000 sats for doing so. And so when I'm consuming content in client, I consume it, and I don't have any ads, and I can either pay for that experience directly from my own stash, or I can go visit an ad server, consume a new type of ad that's going to be more custom to the needs of an advertiser and to the interests of a user, more participatory, so higher value. I would earn sats for participating in that ad, which I could then use to top up a wallet to pay the client, which may then flow through to the relay. But I think it's like a very different type of ecosystem. I don't think it's going to look that similar to the advertising ecosystems we have today. The ad server probably will also have returns to scale because you have to sort of go out and sell all those advertisers. You have to, it's a centralizing function, I think, because, advertisers want to be able to buy at scale. So they want to be able to spend, let's say an advertiser signs up, they want to be able to spend, hundreds of millions of Satoshis on a campaign. They don't want to try to find each person. They need to be able to do that at scale. Obviously, there's
authentication and Sybil resistance and all kinds of problems that are yet to be solved. So we don't have all the answers. But I think if you try to think structurally about what's new here, it seems likely to me that something like that would emerge. So those are my 10. Again, I would love to hear where you agree or disagree. This is sort of meant to be more of a conversation starter, but based on all of the thinking and discussions that I've had so far, and given that we're pretty early into this experiment, these are the kinds of things that I think are likely, and I think it's going to take years to play out for any of this. But tell me where you agree, tell me where you disagree, and I'd love to keep this conversation going. Thanks.